Okay, so let's take a look at PEC major in opposition to some of the things around it. So we're going to remove some layers off of this. So you can still see here's our PEC major muscle over to the humerus, down to the rib cage. And by the way, it is part of breathing as well. And then we've lost it, and we can see PEC minor underneath here. Now, PEC minor, in my opinion, is an upper core muscle of the shoulder. And I call it core because I do feel that it's protective, being as to the way that if it doesn't stay strong, it pulls the body into a protective fetal position. That's what I consider my core muscles. So this is a really important muscle not to add into your pec exercises, which would, and you can see it's attached up here to the scapula, up at the very top by that AC joint. It's right on that um, acromion area of that clavicle or the scapula. So if you come forward with those scapulas in your pec workouts, you're going to shorten this and you're going to contract it. And that's going to be really detrimental for your shoulder integrity. It's going to roll your humerus forward. It's going to take the shoulder blades and roll them around the rib cage into protraction. It's going to shorten the clavicle. The clavicle may start to come upward, which is going to mean it's going to get the scalene short. And then you're going to start having all of these dysfunctions into this area where the brachial plexus runs down that arm. So keep those shoulder blades nice and tucked underneath you. Let's add that layer back, and there's that beautiful PEC major. And you can see why so many people want to have this. This is a gorgeous PEC major on this picture, but look at the different sections of this muscle and how much strength it can hold with the inscriptions that it has, like abdominals. It has these areas where it's going to be very dense with connective tissue to really allow the muscle to work more efficiently. So it's a beautiful muscle. Um, so we're going to see some exercises for PEC major, and then we'll also see how to do a contract and release with a flexibility and a pin and stretch that you can do with your own hands on this. So now the other thing too is this is attached partially to the rib cage, and the rib cage is going to be your inspiration um, efficiency. So if you're locked into your rib cage with muscles because they're either weak or they're dysfunctional, it's going to disallow you to expand that rib cage and open up and get those lungs to get larger and more oxygenated into that, to the blood, and then eventually to everything else in all the systems. But the rib cage also moves all the way around to the back of the thoracic, up and down that vertebral column where the spine is connected to the rib cage. And the muscles are responsible for really moving that area of the spine, the nervous system, and spinal fluids in that area. So PEC major has a lot to do with that because it's going to contract on the rib cage and move the rib cage with expiration and inhalation. So in my opinion, a lot of these phasic muscles have a huge visceral somatic response with the internal organs, and I found in my career that I find when I have PEC major issues, whether it's a thickening of the muscle due to ischemia and overuse and imbalance, or if there's trigger points, because it's fast twitch, I find they radiate inward, sometimes into the heart region, lungs, maybe even if it's a little higher towards the pharynx and the larynx. So remember that the body is a very, very complex unit. So when you start working this muscle out correctly, you're going to see these huge responses for your whole health. So this is a really wonderful area, and it's also going to allow that upper back to relax because the both shoulder blades house some very phasic muscles that once the pecs weaken and they start tightening underneath into that minor, we're going to get all kinds of counter strains into the upper back muscles and rhomboids and trapezius. And if you don't know those are all the muscles by the shoulder blades around the rib cage on the upper back. And not only are you going to develop a load of trigger points in there that are from counter strain, but think about what I just said with the innervations of the into the spine and the connection between visceral and somatic areas of the internal organs. So I said I was going to get into that later with the holistic massage work that I do, and so this will all be kind of a primer for you on that. So there is your Pec Major, that beautiful Pec Major. All right, so we're looking at the movement of Pec Major right now, and this is shoulder horizontal adduction because we're moving inward. And the best thing to know when it comes to training a muscle, and the easiest way to look at training a muscle, is where the origin and insertion of the muscle. So here's your insertion point on the humerus, and then here's your origin, which is along that sternum, the sternum of the rib cage. And those two points are going to come closer together and shorten the fiber. So that's one of the easiest ways to think about how a muscle moves. Now, this has been like one of those arguments years ago about upper pecs, lower pecs, mid pecs, and pectoralis major muscle is considered one muscle, but the section up top here has the clavicular, this is the clavicle, this is the clavicular head of the area of where this top, I'm going to put that on there. Let's put this one up there. So this is the clavicular head. And you can see how this movement goes upward just a little bit, moving towards this plane of the body. And there's your incline press. Now this section has been noted as a postural muscle now, whereas Vladimir Janda had the whole muscle in as a phasic muscle when he was first started doing his work. So this brings my training to a slower, more weighted incline press. Now look at the sternal head, and we have it moving inward again. So this is that lower point, and so this is where I would go lighter and a little bit more movement because this is going to be a longer fiber. And then we have the lower costal part where it's more attached to the rib cage. It's all the same muscle, but now we can see there's that decline press that you see guys doing a lot. So if you were going to go declining downward, and you can see how this arm is moving downward, then again, this is going to be a faster twitch muscle fiber. You would do this with lighter weight and higher repetitions, trying to get a little bit more activity to the muscle to try to get that muscle to fire better. Again, we need to watch that we don't load heavy into those fast twitch fibers because you can get overuses very easily with that. So there's those three. This is kind of a cool program. This is muscles in motion. And then there's the whole muscle all at once. And you can do a few different flies won't incorporate the tricep, whereas a chest press with a bent elbow will. But we'll look at bent presses on this exercise. All right, we're going to do some strength work on Pec Major, but the clavicular head. So Some new research that I just went through is showing that the clavicular head of pec major they are considering to be a postural muscle, whereas the other areas of pec major are phasic. So this is postural, this is phasic. Let me show you specifically. So here is the upper part of, people used to say upper pecs, which I always used to argue because I always felt like pecs was one muscle, but um, it has what they're considering to be a slower fiber, which is able to um, lift a little bit heavier, and it's postural, so it's creating the posture for the body, which means that if it gets weak, it's going to get tight. Now, that's where I'm going to absolutely agree. In my work, I have found people having uh, upper pec area tight. When it's weak, I'll see an indentation here, and then we also can include that anterior deltoid. So we're going to do an exercise today to strengthen this muscle in the gym, and it's going to be a little bit more loaded and a little bit slower. Now, what I'm giving this to people for is strengthening the chest will start to alleviate the counter strain on the upper back muscles like rhomboids and trapezius, and pull the posture back into an upright position. I'm working with somebody right now who has some shoulder pain and some neck thickness. And we're going to get this muscle to get some strength and length so that we can alleviate the neck from being drawn forward and the upper back and shoulder blades as well. So let's go to it. All right, so we're going to look at pec majors trigger points. The reason why I like to show trigger points is so that you can get an idea of how, from the beginning of massage therapy and neuromuscular therapy, that these great masters have said it ain't where it you think it is. And it is absolutely true. When you do pec work, you may trigger off a pec muscle, but there are so many other things that can happen during that period of time. But this gives you some tools for your toolbox in thinking about what you did and what may have been triggered during that action. So if you were outside and you were doing work around your house and you suddenly feel a pain on your arm, you can go back and say, oh, you know what? I remember seeing that trigger point in pec major. And so you go back into the work and you see that muscle and you're like, okay, well, this is a pec muscle. It's actually not a shoulder muscle. So let me do some of these exercises, these pin and stretches, to see if I can deactivate this trigger point. So there is my basis for showing you these things. And here is the clavicular head, and then the sternal division. So we have this, the two trigger points up by the clavicle here that radiate into the arm. I'll have a lot of people think that this is their deltoid. The other thing too is that subscapularis can radiate out to here as well, but also can be an associated muscle to pecs when it comes to utilizing the muscle incorrectly. So if you're doing some type of chest work or something to do with a chest movement and you overreach it and those shoulder blades come around the rib cage, subscapularis is going to get involved with that as much as this pec muscle is going to become overloaded. Now, this division here, we've talked about being postural. This division is not, it's phasic. I call phasic functional because it's a big mover muscle. These three trigger points are going to be more into that more heart attack style trigger point. We've all had that session where we've done too many fly exercises because they just felt so good. We were going to just keep going with them. And then, like maybe 8 hours later, we think we're having a heart attack. So, this is kind of going to be a little bit of that um, brain to body mechanism for you, not mechanism, but like uh, your ability to be able to take information and make it work for you and not get yourself into an anxiety attack. And then that third number C, this is down lower into that fiber where you would be doing those decline presses, and you can see again it's coming down a little bit lower again into that heart attack region where people feel that pain right on top of their heart. And then also look down at the trigger points on the other side and how they can even mimic closer to that sternal connection point of the pec muscle. So these muscles, when I train them, you're going to see me doing these light and 1 counts so that we can really get that muscle fiber, the long fibers, to really open up and elongate and work without a load. And then they'll be able to start getting a little bit stronger in an endurance type of fashion. And then you can start to increase your weight as you are able to. All right, so we're looking at PEC Major. We'll go through the clavicular part first. So the antagonists to this are extensors, abductors, horizontal abductors, and lateral rotators of the humerus. And then the synergists are flexors, adductors, horizontal adductors, and medial rotators of the humerus, which are going to be a good portion of your rotator cuff muscles and then a few of the other accessory muscles. So the sternal part's a little bit more interesting. Antagonistically, it has the lower and middle trapezius, rhomboids, middle deltoid, and posterior deltoid. And then the synergist is the opposite internal oblique, biceps and latissimus dorsi. So there is your first really interesting deduction. In opposite internal oblique, which is a postural muscle, is going to be part of the movement synergist for PEC Major. So if you have a trigger point on the right side, look to the left, opposite internal oblique. Really, really cool. That is one of my muscles that I go to first because that is a huge problem muscle. So there you go. It's a little gift. All right, so one of the corrective strength training movements we're going to do today is going to be for PEC Major at the upper insertion point for the postural part of the muscle. This is new to Vladimir Janda's work, and then anterior deltoid. So this is for when I work on somebody and I look at them from the head down. This area right here looks hollow from the therapy perspective. I'm going to look at the size of their deltoid in comparison to their chest. If their deltoid is dominant, I want them to build up their pecs. If the back of their neck is dominant, it's from that weak pec, because where you're trying to get the pec to fire, you're either taking the shoulder blades in, what's called protracting them around the rib cage and getting the shoulder to push the weight, and then you're using your neck to push back down to get the weight up. So we're going to focus today on an incline chest press. Now, this is the therapeutic way of strength training. So we're going to take this muscle and we're going to take it up in weight and slower. So when we go into therapeutic training and we do these
sets that are fast, slow, heavy, or light, they're going to start to be progressive upon each other. Now, when you look at muscle fiber and you look at the cycle of how muscle fiber first uses its glucose and glycogen and then moves into an aerobic state, we have about 90 seconds before the body actually starts to go into that oxygen phase. So we're shooting for between 10 and 15 repetitions on these. Postural muscles are going to load and be able to maintain the load with more energy for a longer period of time. The fast twitch muscle fiber is not going to like to be loaded. So what we're trying to do with this corrective therapy is get the muscles that are used to being loaded stronger, so that the muscles who don't like to be loaded have more strength in the type of exercise that they are used to, which is more hyperactivity or movements. So I'm going to show you how to do a incline press, and this would be done slower with heavier weight for between 10 and 15. When you start thinking about doing sets, you can do a set where you increase the weight and decrease the repetition. So if I'm going to start with a 10-pound dumbbell today and I'm going to try to go up to 15, then I can go back, take a break, or go to another exercise, come back, take a 12-pound weight. And if I'm working that muscle to its maximum efficiency, I may only be able to effectively get out 12 repetitions on the next set. And then you can move to a 15-pound dumbbell to do 10. Now that might be an exaggeration. Maybe it's more like 12, 10, 8. But keep your numbers up in that. When you're doing therapeutic work, keep your numbers up into that 12, 10, 12, 15. Watch going too low, because you're really starting to push yourself a little too hard with weight. If you start moving into advanced weight training technique, that's another story. But for right now, as we go through these, let's do them on a more the upper section of repetitions. So my bench is on an incline because this muscle is going to be activated with the arm moving into horizontal adduction. So we're bringing the body together, and I'll show you at a different angle too, but we're taking the weight and we have it right next to that muscle, and we're moving it upward towards where it's above the chin, and then we're bringing it back down. So there's your breath in, and it's going to be 1 squeeze, 1 stop, 1 squeeze, 1 stop. And that's your pace. You want to do a 2 count, squeezing, inhaling on the way in. Now the muscle is attached from the upper arm moving to the center of the chest. So we want to have the energy of the muscle moving inward towards the center of the rib cage. Now my shoulder blades are pinned behind me. I'm moving from the ball and socket joint of my arm. My elbows are fully extended, and I do not let those shoulder blades move from the point that they are. When I come down and take my deep breath in, I can even try to draw those shoulder blades back behind me even a little bit more as that muscle starts to warm up and open up. This is going to help build that upper section of that fiber of the pec major muscle and the front deltoid, but we really want to focus on pecs. We want to try to really get that upper pec to fire. Oh. All right, so this is from the straight on position. I'm in an incline right now, and I'm moving upward, and the weights can come together energetically so that you're moving inward towards the center of the chest. So here's your deep breath in, shoulder blades back, exhale, and up for 2 and squeeze. Squeeze the armpit area up high, inward towards the center of the chest. And feel the energy of that big chest muscle working. And inhale to an exhale. Good. And that should give you a pretty good idea. Good luck. Now those key principles are really important. Make sure that you keep your shoulder blades pinned behind you. If the shoulder blade starts to protract because it's not in the right position, you're going to shorten your internal rotator cuff. You're going to shorten those front deltoid muscles, and you're going to probably more than likely push into the back of that bench with your head. Now I'm going to put up on here some of the synergists and the antagonists of this muscle so that you can see how antagonistic trigger points can work and how trigger points can move from muscle to muscle. So if this muscle becomes weak and possibly has trigger points, how it can start to change those other muscles and make them more vulnerable to injuries. Postural muscles really need to have a nice density and a nice strength to them so that they keep those phasic muscles in a good place. All right, so we did some exercises for Pec Major. I have all the information up so that you can see this muscle, this beautiful pec muscle. It's so much of your chest, and like your rear end and your abdominals and your lats, when you don't work it, it's gonna sag. It's got very long fiber. I tell everybody it's like spaghetti. When you let spaghetti go, it sags, right? And that's these muscles. You need to keep firing these muscles to keep them working and healthy. So we did the exercises. I showed you how to do your loads for the upper fibers and the lower fibers. And now we'll do a pin and stretch with PECs. And you can just do this with your hands. And you know, PECs is coming through this part of the arm, those upper fibers, which are really the fibers that you want to focus on. The lower fibers are going to be long, so we really need to focus on our postural fibers. So this piece right under the armpit that you can squeeze, take the first finger and follow that right to the shoulder, and then just hold on lightly with the other three fingers. And I want you to gently feel it contract, come forward and move the energy into the muscle, and then hold on to it and move the arm back. And then relax, gently hold on to it, and now squeeze. There's your proprioceptive, it's tense, relax, and then there's your pin and stretch. It's very beautiful. You can do it the other side same way. See if they're even, right? So come forward, squeeze the muscle, relax, and then open and pin and stretch. This will also be your neurokinetic, right? If I come forward, there's my contraction. I can feel my muscle. There's my contraction. I can feel my muscle. If I want to go into here, there's my contraction. That's neurokinetic, making sure that those muscles are firing. And you can do that now that you can see them on the body and where they go to. You can do that through your whole pec muscle and start to see if everything is firing properly. I had a case where this section of the sternal division, that big part of the pec, wasn't firing on the right side but on the left side. So my client was developing his shoulder on the right into a very shortened internal rotation, and the clavicular section up top was really short and tight, and this section was hollow. And so what I did with him is I just got him into that bench position, and then we sat there and we practiced neurokinetic firing, and so that he could start to feel that while he did a fly or a chest press, until he started registering it with that re-education on that muscle. And it takes that much to do good training. You really do have to be poking at yourself a little bit, not too much, just enough so that you can feel these muscles are working, because sometimes they do stop working for many reasons. They are in the wrong positions, the body has shifted and it's no longer able to function in the right position, or it's got fibrosities in it, where what you might call knots, where the muscle fiber just can't work properly because of those. Ischemic tissue around it, the connective tissue. The connective tissue goes all the way through everything on your body. It's a cellular connection, so it's not only in the muscles, there's the connective tissue of fascia around the muscle, that white material. So those can get bunched up because of the shortening. But remember, the 206 bones that you have on your body don't have anywhere to go unless you have muscles that are working them. So you really want to always think about that. So there's the end of Pec Major. And we'll do Pec Minor with some of the, I'll probably just do a full deep core on Pec Minor because Pec Minor really doesn't do the same thing as Pec Major. But we just want to really be careful, again, of subscapularis and Pec Minor, that we're not drawing those shoulder blades together.